From the National Catholic Register, this is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
Well, as all of us are aware, Pope Francis has been undergoing care and battling pneumonia now for some 2 weeks, even as Catholics and non-Catholics alike pray for his recovery. This week on Register Radio, we're joined by EWTN Senior Vatican Analyst Frank Rocca with the latest from Rome. And then, we're only days away from Ash Wednesday and the start of the Lenten season. We hear from Register contributors Katie Warner and Debbie Cowden on how to get the most out of Lent. Hello, I'm Matthew Bunson, host of Register Radio and EWTN News' Vice President and Editorial Director. I'm joined, as always, in studio here in Washington, D.C. by Shannon Mullen, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register. Welcome, Shannon.
Hello, Matthew.
Well, it's been a long couple of weeks, I know, as we have followed the travails, the suffering of the Holy Father, but things do seem to be at least marching towards some improvement, which is great news for everyone.
They're going in the right direction, I think we can say, which is positive.
So let's bring Frank Rocca into the conversation. Frank, how are you?
Well, very well. Thanks, Matthew. Shannon, good to be here.
Well, as we were just noting, we are recording here on Thursday afternoon. That's an important note to make because we get these daily updates from the Holy See as to the condition of the Holy Father. And I think we can safely say that today's news was certainly optimistic. What did we hear today?
Well, I mean, in the morning, there was an unofficial word from Vatican sources, shall we say, that his condition is still critical and the prognosis is guarded, and that's essentially what they said in the evening too. They did say he showed some more improvement. So he showed some more improvement, but they say that because the prognosis cannot be determined yet, they still need some more days of stable health before they can do that. So they're being very careful. Last Friday, of course, they gave us a pretty meaty briefing, a couple of the Pope's doctors, and answered some interesting questions and talked about the dangers and their worst years and so forth. And we can maybe hope that they'll do that. They will have done that on Friday, the second Friday, the 2-week mark of his care. Maybe we can get some more detail because these communiques are very terse. And I have to say they don't seem too euphemistic or they don't seem to be prettifying the situation. So they've gained some credibility for the Vatican, which I think is important in the long term, even beyond this pontificate, that they handle this well. That's important because there were complaints back in 2005, as you both know, that there was not enough transparency with John Paul.
Frank, this is not your first rodeo, I know. So if we go back even just to Benedict's resignation, and then more recently his death, what's happened in the meantime is social media just gets more intense every day. With this serious illness of the Holy Father, what's the larger media environment been like, particularly there in Rome?
Well, a lot of people have come from out of town. This always happens. At a certain point, it's hard to judge, and so you do have lots and lots of people who come in from the States and from many other countries. And there's it's sort of kind of hurry up and wait. I mean, there's sort of, it's because he could be in the hospital for a while, and then he could come out and be better, and so then people will have to figure out when it's time to go home. In the meantime, I think there's a lot of need to come up with something to say and to think. And so there's a lot of speculation now about will he resign? I don't think there's much basis for that. But of course, I didn't expect Benedict to resign either. But I don't think that Francis has given an indication that he will resign. But there is a lot of talk about that.
Yeah, and there's also been several articles that we have seen across different media platforms about who's in charge in the Vatican when the Pope is in the hospital or when he's under the weather or in a crisis situation like Pope Francis has been. I know Catholic News Agency did one that the Register has picked up as part of its service. So, Frank, can we just say that in a short phrase, who is in charge of the Vatican when the Pope is in the hospital?
Well, I think de facto the Secretary of State, because the Pope is, I mean, we don't know how much, almost every day we get these bulletins, he dedicated part of his day to work activities.
Right.
So we don't know to what extent he's not, we know after 12 years that he's not the sort of person who will just say, oh, you deal with it, I won't worry about it. He's very curious and always wants to find out what's going on. So to the extent that he's able, he's probably doing that. But I guess more generally, it is a valid concern, because we know that whether it's fair or not, the pontificate of John Paul II is haunted by, among other things, the story that toward the end they were pushing through bishop nominations and everything, and he didn't really know what he was doing, and his signature was being forged. Now, I'm not a historian of that period, but I'm just saying. So I should think they were very careful to want to avoid that this time around, because we do think of the Pope as this, the holy figure, of course, but he is also elected and he has legitimacy by virtue of that. And so you want to avoid the possibility that anybody think that anybody who's not legitimate is making the real decision.
Yeah, we're trying to exploit a situation to their own advantage or some agenda. One aspect that I was really eager to ask you about is we've covered conclaves in the past. We've covered a number of popes now. Right now, given the environment, what is it like to cover a story like this? You just alluded to some similarities to John Paul II with his slow decline. Would that be the closest analogy? And what are the differences as a reporter that you're seeing from then to now?
Well, I think one thing, obviously, in 2005, there wasn't social media, I don't think really at all. There was certainly the internet. But and now these updates, which are of great interest, and people have a great appetite for them who are curious about what's happening, what they're concerned, they go out immediately. And they go out, it takes literally seconds to relay what we get from the Holy See Press Office to put it on Twitter or whatever. And so this is totally disintermediated. Everyone's getting this immediately. And so I think for a lot of the journalists for whom their bread and butter was rehashing, this information. That's a bit harsh, but repackaging and analyzing and so forth. This makes the job harder, because you really have to add value. Because by the time even a fast wire service like Associated Press gets this up, people who care already know it. Of course, if you've got scoops or something, that's different. But so I think that therein may lie some of the articles about, will he resign? Well, some say he will, some say he won't. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. And you're wondering what's going on here. But so I don't know if that partially answers it. I think there's a kind of frustration with keeping up. It's something that's true about media and many other contexts.
Well, then about 3 or 4 days ago, we saw some social media posts that the Pope, according to sources, had 72 hours to live. Well, obviously, we have passed now 72 hours. But the other question I had for you, and I think this is something we'll probably want to revisit sometime in the future, but in the reporting today, there seems to be a marked decrease in religious literacy on the part of a lot of reporters, probably reflecting the fact that there has been a lack of resources committed to the beat. Have you seen that, and what's the impact of that?
Well, I think that's been happening for a while, yeah. A lot of outlets, including the one that I worked for, I was the only person. Well, at the time that I left, I was the only person who was covering religion at all, and not just the Vatican. And I think there's strategic choices are being made that religion is not a standalone subject that a lot of outlets want to cover. I think that's a mistake, personally, since I've spent years now covering it. But that's been happening for a while. A lot of papers used to have somebody who would do religion, I think, and there still is a Religion News Writers Association in the United States. I think a lot of people are freelancers. It's funny. You think that good and bad religion would be an obviously relevant subject. Whether you're talking about religiously inspired violence on the bad side, or whether you're talking about more edifying things. And the fact that this is what's happening right now is hugely interesting to people all over the world, even who are not Catholic.
Frank, there's these moments in the course of the church's life where it really does feel like a family. One of those is when a pope dies, or in this case, is sick. We've seen an incredible outpouring of prayer from around the world, but particularly there in the Vatican, there in Rome. Can you just touch a little bit on what's been happening there out in public, St. Peter's Square, relative to people praying for him?
Yeah, well, for several nights running, and I guess indefinitely until he's out of the woods, there have been the rosary prayer, a group of people praying the rosary in the St. Peter's Square, led by a cardinal. And so that's been very affecting. We remember back in 2005, there was a spontaneous showing of people coming and praying in St. Peter's Square for Pope John Paul. And at one point, the Vatican sort of decided to sort of channel it, so to speak, and Cardinal Sandri led the rosary prayer. And I think it was while he was doing that, if I'm not mistaken, I may be mushing things together, but it was that Pope John Paul actually died. What I'm seeing here is less spontaneous. I think that might be partially the weather, frankly. I mean, John Paul died in April, and this is, it's dark and sort of rainy and cold, and so that might be part of it. There are fewer pilgrims in Rome in February than there are in April, so that might be part of it. But on the other hand, they seem to have learned from that experience, and so they've got this very moving liturgy or prayer that's going on every night.
Frank, in the next weeks, we will see how the Holy Father fares. Obviously, we're all of us praying for his full recovery. What would be the next logical step out of that recovery? I'm sort of asking you to put on your prognosticator's hat here. Returning to Santa Marta, I'm assuming?
Well, yeah, I could. We were talking today. No one talks about anything else, obviously. But I was saying, I could with this kind of stable situation, and we know he's pulled through before. Oh yeah, and he's very willful. So we thought, well, I just thought, this is just me. I could see him spending several weeks in the hospital and coming out probably weakened. I mean, the doctors warned last week at the briefing. They said, he's going to have these chronic respiratory problems, which he already did have some of, but I mean, the understanding was that they've been aggravated by the trauma. So I could see him coming out and having a sort of last act. I don't know how long, whether it be months or maybe more, in a kind of weakened state, but still alert and maybe reducing his activities. It's hard to imagine him going on a marathon, 11-day papal trip to Asia.
Right, and I think, but we can anticipate that given him, he will try to resume a regular work schedule, considering that we are hearing that he's working in the hospital. Yeah. So, well, Frank, thank you so much, as always, for the updates, and look forward to talking with you.
Thank you.
Well, you're listening to Register Radio here on EWTN Radio. Coming up, we're joined by Katie Warner and Debbie Cowden, who will tell us how to have a very good Lent. Stay tuned to Register Radio.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
And welcome back. I'm Matthew Bunson here in our D.C. studios with Shannon Mullen, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register. Well, Ash Wednesday is upon us this week, marking the start of Lent. As we begin this beautiful penitential journey, we welcome Katie Warner and Debbie Cowden. They both have written pieces that can help that journey be truly meaningful. Debbie wrote 10 holy reminders to help you have a holy Lent, and Katie Warner offered up how to plan a Lenten family retreat. We thought it would be great to have them both on to talk about their advice for Lent and just to share some of their own experiences and advice as all of us begin, as I was saying, that journey. So welcome to both of you. So I want to start with you, Katie, because I was intrigued immediately by the title of your piece, How to Plan a Lenten Family Retreat. There are so many challenges to parents, and yet planning a family retreat might not be top of mind for a lot of Catholic families.
Yeah, it's so worth it. We actually started this practice many years ago, and now it's become one of our favorite family traditions. We actually have a number of families in town who, after finding out that we did this, started doing it themselves, and they say the same thing. It's just worth every minute. And the good thing is that you don't necessarily have to do an overnight retreat. A pilgrimage, even just during the day, sometime during Lent as a family, can just yield a lot of fruit. I'm kind of inspired by Christ in Mark 6:31, who Jesus always took the time to enter into silence and prayer. And so in the midst of the hustle and bustle of daily life and other commitments that we often have as families during the Lenten season, it's really helpful to consider just going away by yourselves as a family and rest a while. And so something as simple as picking a local church. There's also several dioceses that have selected certain parishes to visit as part of the Jubilee year, or you can look for a shrine or a monastery or a retreat center near you. And like I said, either make it an overnight stay or just a day trip. But no matter where you go, it's really having that time away together as a family to celebrate Mass and confession, visit an adoration chapel, pray the Stations of the Cross together, and then also just have family fun time making memories, maybe going hiking or going to a botanical garden nearby. That really helps allow children to remember this as a very special family time every year, where you can enter into the Paschal Mystery together and really prepare your hearts to remember Christ's Passion in a special way as a family each year.
Katie, I love this story. It's a wonderful piece, but it's also a terrific, amazing idea. And I've never heard of it before. I've actually don't know any families who have done that, except for yours. Programming alert to my own mostly grown children. This is something that we're going to be talking about. But did you invent this idea?
First of all, I'm glad I put it on your radar and your children. It was something that my husband and I had talked about. We loved the idea of having, in general, a family retreat, even if it was just to get away and talk about our family mission and how we're living that out as a family. And then both my husband and I try to make sure that we can make individual retreats as often as possible in in a season of raising lots of little ones. But then it just kind of became a conversation between the two of us that we should do this as a family. And it's really amazing the difference between just changing locations, right? Like, of course, we're all going to Sunday Mass together, but something about just shaking things up and going to a special holy place that we don't go to all the time together just really puts everybody in a totally different mindset and place. And so in addition to being able to pray together, like I said, we can also talk about things going on in our family. It's a great opportunity to bring up discussions about, how everybody's doing in their spiritual lives, how everybody's doing in their relationships with one another, and goals and dreams that we have as a family, in addition to just being able to give the children a chance to lead in the retreat. They'll lead prayer, lead the Stations of the Cross. They'll help us decide our itinerary for our family pilgrimage. And it just has become a very special memory that we have, and one that my children honestly look forward to every year. They're more likely to ask us, when is our next pilgrimage, than they are, when is our next vacation, because they see it as just as valuable to their lives. And I love that, because we've been able to bring not only the spiritual side of it, but just the family connectedness into it that makes them really excited to do it.
Yeah, and Debbie, Katie used the word bringing up reminders, and your piece on 10 holy reminders to help you have a holy Lent. I know at the Register we love to feature gift guides and things, but what you've offered up is well beyond just a gift guide.
That's right. And it's not like your typical gift guide, because these are usually, with the gift guides, gifts that you give to others. But this is a gift that you give yourself during this time of Lent. And it's not a traditional gift guide. It's one to help you boost your prayer and really have something special that you're doing in terms of your devotions for Lent. And that's why we wanted to highlight, first of all, Mother Angelica's Way of the Cross, which is edited by Father Joseph Mary Wolfe from EWTN. These are meditations that Mother Angelica used when she prayed the Stations of the Cross, which, by the way, she says you don't have to pray just during Lent. You can pray them year-round particularly during Lent, we remember the way of the cross. You also, if you've never heard of it before, EWTNRC.com has Stations of the Cross chaplets. So it looks like a rosary, but it actually helps you meditate on the stations when you're praying the station itself and then the corresponding Our Father, Hail Mary, and Glory Be. And I think that's a really great way to keep track of the prayers. We also have My Daily Way of the Cross pamphlets. So you can have the Stations of the Cross meditations in your home. You also can donate some extra copies to your prayer group or to your parish. One of the things that we've been doing at EWTN Religious Catalog also is promoting what we call the ash tag, which is a graphic that depicts the ashes that go on your forehead. And we've got a daily devotional candle. I'm sorry, a candle. It's very hard to say that. A daily devotional candle with an examination of conscience on it. And this is one of those really simple holy reminders that can make a huge difference in your prayer life, because it can handle in the evening while you're doing your daily examination of conscience, which just happens to be on the back of that candle, that gives you a way to reflect on the sins or the failings of the day and then commit to doing better the next day. We also have a Memento Mori, Remember Your Death Lenten devotional. Now, Memento Mori is the practice of remembering your death, not in a morbid or fearful way, but just reminding us that we are not made for this earth. We are made for heaven, and our journey on earth is supposed to prepare us for heaven. And so we have a devotional that was assembled by Sister Teresa Alethea, and perfect for Lent, also in November for the month of the Holy Souls. We have Father Wade Menezes' The Four Last Things, which is proudly published by EWTN, and that's to help you reflect on death, judgment, heaven, and hell. We have the Chaplet of Seven Sorrows of Mary, and so if that's a devotion that you've never heard of before, it's reflecting on the seven sorrows of Mary, so the prophecy of Simeon, the flight into Egypt, the loss of the Lord for 3 days, carrying of the cross, the crucifixion of Jesus, and then when Jesus is taken down from the cross and when he's buried. And so all of these devotionals that we have include an instructional prayer card so that you can learn how to pray it. And then the final thing that we have that I really want to talk about is our 9-inch crown of thorns. And this is where holy reminders can be particularly impactful if you have children as well, because sometimes the idea of a crown of thorns can be sort of abstract, but this is a real crown of thorns that is handcrafted in Jerusalem, and it's made of real thorns. And so your children can immerse themselves in how painful it was for Jesus to have that crown of thorns pressed onto his head. And yes, how he would have bled his precious blood for us. My children and I use the crown of thorns at our house, and we found it to be really impactful for children. So we have a whole bunch of holy reminders at EWTNRC.com, and they're all designed to help you grow in your devotion to our Lord. And these ones particularly during Lent.
Deb, we've only got a couple minutes, but I wanted to note an earlier piece you had written, 5 things you should not do during Lent. That sort of hit me between the eyes a little bit. One of those things is you should not attempt absurd penances. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, really, the purpose of your penance is supposed to help make you holier. And so while it sounds really noble to do things like cold showers or a bread and water fast or give up coffee completely, those penances are for people in certain states in life. So for example, I am a mom of 4 children. I am still breastfeeding. If I were to do a bread and water penance, that would not help me fulfill my duties in life, and it could be a near occasion of sin in some cases. So when you're considering doing a penance, you should ask yourself, first of all, how is this going to make me holy? Second, you should ask yourself, is this something that I'm doing to root out vice in my life, or is it doing the hardest I can do to have other people see me doing the hardest thing? And thirdly, have I consulted my pastor, my spiritual director, or my spouse about this? Because really quickly, there was one year I wanted to give up coffee, and my husband got our priest friend to join him in saying, you absolutely cannot give up coffee for Lent. In that particular state in life, I was not going to be setting myself up for success. So please pray about your penances and make sure that they are going to lead you toward God and not toward committing sin.
The coffee warning, I think, is very apt for a lot of people. In the very brief time that we have left, Katie, one of the pieces of advice that you give is to set aside a budget for holy souvenirs to remember the pilgrimage and time together. Why is that important?
Yeah, all of us remember when we were children even having little tokens from vacations that we've been on. And so my children love being able to go into a shrine or a monastery gift shop and just get a little something to remember their pilgrimage by. And so we always try to put a little money aside in the budget so that they can do that. But I also just wanted to piggyback, if there was a moment, off of something that Debbie said, because I, in the process of planning this family pilgrimage article, I also was reviewing one of the quotes by St. John Henry Cardinal Newman that I love. And he says that it is the saying of holy men that if we wish to be perfect, we have nothing more to do than to perform the ordinary duties of the day well. So just to kind of, basically, like I said, mention something Debbie had said, that some of the best ways that we can grow in holiness during Lent aren't necessarily doing all the things, but just doing the small things of our day really well, whether that's giving our first thoughts to God, or saying the rosary well, or keeping out bad thoughts, or examining yourself daily. These are some of the little tips that Cardinal Newman gives us, and basically teaches us that just living a single day well is a step closer to perfection. And that's a good, really great reminder for all of us as we enter into Lent. So whether or not we're planning a family pilgrimage or keeping it simple and just waking up every day and saying, I just want to be the best version of myself today for the Lord and to glorify Him in everything I do, then we're setting ourselves up for a really beautiful Lent with for ourselves and for our families.
Yeah, with coffee as needed. Well, thanks so much for joining us here on Register Radio this week. Remember, for more news, analysis, and commentary, check out the National Catholic Register online at ncregister.com. On behalf of our producer, Michael McCall, myself, Matthew Bunson, and Shannon Mullen, please take care, God bless, and may your Lent be truly a blessed one.